gentle intro to reinforcement learning. So when last time I was presenting here my work on Bayesian inference for dimensional machine learning problems, and so the public was originally I've said, okay, I will do something let's say a little bit more colloquial and easy to grasp, and so we decided with Alex to speak a little bit about reinforcement learning. So I did reinforcement learning quite a long time ago. In fact, I started to do this say more than 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I worked a bit on bandit problems, and then I more or less stopped working on that. But now reinforcement learning becomes a very, very popular topic. So and I will try to give a kind of outlook using slides which are part of this slide are mine. Other slides are from several work, in particular from Bartow and Sutton or David Silver's slide. So you will recognize some slide if you are used to this. So I will speak about reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning is a very, will be the center of my talk. And so the problem of reinforcement learning is about taking rational decision, if you wish. And the problem of setting rational decision, of course, is important in machine learning, of course. And I will spend most of the time to explain why it's important in machine learning. But it is formulated, and the treatment are basically the same in other domains, so like in engineering, where it is closely linked with something which is called optimal control, and many aspects of what we will say in reinforcement learning can be more or less translated into the vocabulary of optimal control. There are also a lot of things in economics which where you try to optimize individual utilities. You take a decision according by trying to maximize some utilities. So it's also closely linked with reinforcement learning, and there are even close relation in psychology where people try to understand the way human beings learn when they are babies, and that we are continually learning. So the reinforcement learning can be a way, so it's a very simple way. Most likely it's much more complicated than that, but it's a simple formalization of the way we are learning from examples. Okay, so that's the main. So we'll be in the center, and there are of course a lot of things which are connected to what I will speak on today. So reinforcement learning is a kind. So if you have machine learning, so in machine learning you are well aware that there are basically three big things. So one which is more or less solved today, which is supervised learning. So when I say at least there have been a lot of advances recently in supervised learning, and now most of the tasks in supervised learning that people were thinking that would be extremely difficult, like computer vision or speech recognition, are basically solved. So it's not completely solved, but there are many great advances in this direction. So there's another big topic which is much less advanced, which is unsupervised learning. So where you don't learn a behavior from example, but you try to make sense out of big mass of data. So right now it's not really solved, and reinforcement learning has a completely different nature. I will explain later on, but reinforcement learning it's a way to learn where you learn by interacting with your environment. So it's not compared to supervised learning. On supervised learning, there is something in reinforcement learning which makes it different from the other settings, in the sense that you are continuously interacting with your environment. So you learn things from your environment by playing with the environment. So what makes reinforcement learning different from the two other machine learning paradigms is that there is no supervision. So compared to supervised learning, there is no something telling you what is the answer. So where in supervised learning, you have data, so which are typically you have a set of attributes, so like images, and you have labels. So you have a set of pixels, and you know that it is a cat, or you have a set of pixels, you know that it is a dog. So there is a supervision signal, which is a label or a number to predict. Okay, The difference is that so in reinforcement learning, you don't have really a supervision, but you have a reward. So when you take an action, I will describe it. When you take an action, you obtain, after taking an action, you obtain a reward. So the second thing, which is also different from supervised learning, is that the feedback might be delayed. So you make an action, you obtain a reward, but at the same time, you interact with the environment. And interacting with the environment, you change the state of the world. So you change, by acting on the environment, you change the state of the environment. So perhaps you will not have a great reward for the action that you are taken, but you will have future rewards. So the thing which is interesting is the fact that there is a feedback and there is a delayed feedback in the sense that you can take actions which are suboptimal, but that will prove to be optimal in some sense on the long run. As I said already, also time really matters in the sense that, contrary to supervised learning, so reinforcement learning is that you are continuously playing against or with the environment. So it's like you are collecting data sequentially, and all this data typically, except in very, very specific scenario, like bandits, I will explain what is a bandit later on, all these data are non-ID. So we are typically, all these data are Markov chains. This is why I've got I work a lot on Markov chain, and it's typically an example where Markov chains are everywhere. I will explain why. And also, as I said already, and something which is completely different from supervised or unsupervised learning, in the fact that every action that you take modifies the state of the environment. So you will every action of the agent, of the learning agent, modify the subsequent data that you receive, so which is something which is completely different from supervised learning. In supervised learning, when you receive a photo of, receive an image of a cat, if you recognize a dog, you don't really change what will happen next. Okay, so it's different. Okay, so there are many examples of reinforcement learning. So the first, this one are two. I will show one funny example, but this one you can find this flying stunt maneuver of the helicopter. So it's difficult because it's explained. You will find it on YouTube. So don't look YouTube immediately, but you will find it on YouTube. It's funny because it's I think it's a PhD work of someone which is very well known because of his. Because he's a great scientist, but also a great. He has written on Coursera a very popular course on machine learning called Michael. I don't know the word. Ng. You know him, or from Coursera in machine learning, Michael Ge, and Andrew. Sorry, Andrew Ge. And I think it's his PhD thesis. So it's a kind of. To my opinion, is one of the very first, very impressive experiments where they learn an optimal policy from it's an helicopter, so it can be seen as a control problem. So they try to put an helicopter to do things which are to do some kind of maneuver, and they control the helicopter without explicitly telling the model. So compared to typical optimal control problems, they learn from examples and not from a model. Okay, so it's very spectacular, but you will see that later. So of course there's another very classical example which is much earlier than is a bit like the GoMoGo. So you know the reinforcement learning has been used. So it's a very specific form of reinforcement learning has been used to defeat champion of Go Lee Sedol 2 years ago. But much before, in fact, there was, in a much simpler game called backgammon, there was a reinforcement learning algorithm which has defeated the world champion of backgammon, and it was in the mid-90s, I would say, end of 90s. There is also a huge number of people which have tried to do reinforcement learning to do investment portfolio, and there is even, if you read, there is a big book written by a Russian scientist which explains reinforcement learning with financial data. So it's so you can try to. So he proposed. So basically, what you do is, and it's a type of ideas where you use reinforcement learning in a slightly different way from what I will explain, in the sense that you try to look, in fact, at investment done by men, okay, by traders, and you try from this. You're trying to do a kind of policy improvement. So each trader has his own policy, and typically, what you just observe the sequence of action and rewards from the policy which are played by different traders, and then out of this. You solve a task which is called sometimes inverse reinforcement learning, and you try to get a better or even an optimal policy. So Alex start to be interested because optimal policy, investment portfolio, and okay. So there are what I did myself in a PhD thesis. It was that I supervised 6 years ago. It was to do reinforcement learning to control building in energy. So I think I have rooms to do something in Russia because it's very, very hot, so you can do better. So the reward would say to have the reward is a comfort in the room, for example, and the action would be to make an action on the on the heater. So it's also a typical control problem, and that you can solve with reinforcement learning. You can make a humanoid robot walk, so that's very interesting. I will try to show this, and I will start by because the last one is very interesting also. The last one are Atari games. So Atari before, so the big, you know the big company in reinforcement learning is DeepMind, and one of the first problems they have solved, they have proposed a kind of universal reinforcement learning architecture to solve Atari games. And they compare with, and they start by training their. So in the 5 years ago, 6 years ago, they start by trying to learn policy from good Atari game players. So they have hired people to play Atari game. Okay, so it's good job. What are you doing? I am playing Atari game. That's what. And then there is a self-learn Atari game. I will show you an example now from DeepMind. So it should be there. So it's a very old game, by the way. Okay, so it's a Space Invaders. So you know Space Invaders. Will it work? I hope so. Yes. Okay, so it's Space Invaders. Okay, there is some sound even. Okay, so no, it's not Space Invaders. I take the Breakout. So you know, in Breakout, you try to learn how to destroy. So it's a very simple. So after 10 minutes of training, so 10 minutes means nothing because I have huge computers, so it can be 10 minutes. So you know this word, so you are too young to remember this type. It was the first type of games. So of course, the action is what? So what you have to do is that you have to optimize. You have to optimize the score there, so it's a total reward. And what are the actions? So you play. The action is to play basically in order to break the world. So okay, and you will see that he starts to be very, very good. So he has understood that he has to be to put this thing in front of the red spot, and then he has then learned extremely efficient way to. And after 200 betting, he has understood that you have to make a tunnel, so you have to, and then that you will see it's funny. So it's really amazing. Okay, and this is learned without really programming. So the thing is that so the thing which is amazing is that it has been learned without explaining nothing to the machine, in the sense that the only thing that he has to know is what is the reward. So he has the reward to increase, and otherwise he see the state of the machine is simply the image. So it's a pixelized image. So that's the state of the machine. So there is not even a conceptualization, and this is why it makes the thing difficult. There is no conceptualization of what is the game. So and this is the same. the same type of algorithm works for other games like spacecraft or things like that. So it's rather funny for this. Okay, so there is I will show you. So there are a lot of Atari games. So there are games where, so in some Atari games, this type of reinforcement learning, so from DeepMind, is typically much better. So most of the games are much better than the human beings. Okay, especially there are, for example, Flipper. So you know Flipper. So Flipper is never lost. It never lose the ball. So it's incredible. It's endless. So it makes the play endless. Okay, but it's bad at some. It's bad as for some game is not very good. It's a game where you have a really delayed reward. So typical game is a game, for example, where you have to find a key. So for a human being, it's completely evident. Where you have a key and there is a door, so you understand that you should keep the keys and you should put the key into the door. But for a machine, if you don't explain anything, we just train. It trained by doing this at random. So you have a long sequence of things where no reward, and this is for this type of stuff, it's not super good. Okay, so I will show you, of course, the same thing with a robot. So it's from Google. This one. You will see that he learns. So the same thing. So it really learns to without any supervision. So it do not explain the. So the reward is to. So with the quadruped, so it's funny. He has understood that he should jump when there is hold because when he trains, of course, he has you put a really negative reward when you fall, and he knows that he has a link to go to play to A and B and so on. So you don't have so there are very spectacular examples right now. So people get very excited about this type of stuff, and I will try to explain how all these things works. Okay. So what are the? So I will try to describe it a little bit with mathematics. So I will not do too much math today, but a little bit more in the second hour. So what the basic thing is that you will, in all these games you have a reward. So a reward is a scalar number, okay, which can be positive or negative. You can have positive reward or negative reward. And this reward, in fact, tells the agent if it's doing well at step t. So, for example, if you want to make a robot go to A to B or without falling into gaps, so you have a super negative reward when you fall in a gap. So, which means that he will fall in a gap, there is a negative reward, and you restart the game, and he will try to jump because he knows that if he fall in a hole, he will have a negative reward. So the whole stuff is about. The agent will learn his environment. I will explain what is an environment by by looking only at rewards. And the objective of the agent is to try to maximize not his immediate reward, but its cumulative reward. So you will sum the rewards over the experiment, over each episode of the experiment. If you have several games, and what you are trying to do is that you are trying to find policy. I will define also what is a policy to maximize the cumulative reward. So the goal of reinforcement learning is to try donc to maximize the cumulative reward. For example, in the different example where we have as I have shown, so for an helicopter maneuvers, you have a positive reward if you follow the desired trajectory. So it's like a control problem, but formulated in terms of reinforcement learning. So if you are close to the desired trajectory, then you have a positive reward, and of course you have a strong negative reward if you crash. Okay. In the backgammon, it's like in the Go. In the what you will have no reward basically during the game, but you have a strong reward when you win the game, and you have a strong negative reward when you lose the game. But you don't have. It's a typical type of games where you don't have rewards along the game. So which is a bit different from in chess, for example, you might have, so in chess, you might have function evaluation where you have rewards which are linked with more or less the position of on the chessmate. Okay, but in backgammon or in Go, you don't have this type of evaluation function. So you only have a reward at the end of the game. For investment portfolio, of course, you have positive reward for the number of dollars you have in bank, or a negative reward if you have lost your money. When you control a power station, you have positive reward when you produce power, and you have negative reward when you are exceeding safety threshold or not making enough power. For a humanoid robot, you have positive reward if you go in the right direction, and you have negative reward if you fall or if you don't go in the right direction. And for Atari games, you have positive or negative reward for increasing or decreasing the score. So it's really linked to the reward, the cumulative reward in Atari games. Of course, it's the score of the game. So it's directly linked. Atari games are really, you have action, you have a state, which is a game, and you have the reward, which is a cumulative reward, because the score of the game is a cumulative reward. So this is really a sequential decision-making problem. So you select action to maximize the total future reward. You have to take in mind that action may have long-term consequences. Okay, so if you take an action, then you are in a given state, and then you have modified the environment. So each action have an action on the environment. That the reward that you observe may be delayed. So sometimes you might have to take an action, and you don't observe immediately a reward. And this is why sometimes it's better to sacrifice immediate reward to gain long-term reward. This is typically what you do when you do a financial investment, or perhaps when you do financial investment, you will not immediately gain money, but you know that it's a good investment, and it may take months in order to prove that you will have a reward. When you fly an helicopter, of course, if you refuel the helicopter, you have a negative reward immediately, but at the same time, when you do a long sequence of action, you will avoid crash, because you have enough fuel to reach a goal. When you do Go or backgammon, you might do action which seems to be suboptimal, but which block opponent moves and may be proved to be very useful later on. So it means that the thing which is important is that you should not be too myopic in the sense that you should take actions which are good in terms of future rewards. Okay, so let's start to be a little bit more explicit. So what are the framework of reinforcement learning? So reinforcement learning, what you will have, you have at some end you have a reward, okay, that you receive, okay. You have the observations, okay. The observation are all the sensor data that you get by observing the world. You have an algorithm. Here, this is algorithm that you are, and from this algorithm, you take an action. Okay, so in fact, reinforcement learning algorithm is an algorithm which takes observations. Okay, then it observes rewards, and from the observation and the reward, it takes actions. Okay, so typically, if you look at an Atari game, what are the observations? The observations are simply the screen, okay, so what is the picture at the given instant t, okay, so it gives you an observation. When you are flying an helicopter, it will be you have a lot of sensors on the helicopter, so you have sensors which are measuring the speed, which are measuring the altitude, which are measuring the angular speed and things like this. So you have all these sensors which give you an observation, and then you observe also a reward, and from the observations that you get and from the reward that you received, then you have an algorithm which produce a sequence of actions. So this is exactly what it means. So what happens? So what in this formalization, at each 10 steps, so you have an agent. Okay, what the agent do? The agent takes action. Okay, so this is what he's doing. So he takes an action which will change the state of this environment. And what the agent received, so he received observation from the environment and he received a reward from the environment. And if you look at the rule of the game, but seen from the environment, so the environment receives an action, okay, then it emits a new observation and emits a new reward. And then you increment that, so it's in discrete time. Of course, you can also model that in continuous time. So, for example, in optimal control, there are many, in stochastic optimal control, typically it's, you can formulate this type of problem in continuous time, but for reinforcement learning, so you have, we look only at discrete time. Okay, so what you obtain like this, you obtain an history of the game. So if you try to describe what you are doing, so what you are doing that at every time step, you have an observation, a reward, an action, and so which means that at time t, you have the set of all observation, reward, and action up to time t. Okay, so that gives you the history, the total history of the game. Okay. And what you are trying to what you are trying to predict from this, from the history of the action, observation, and rewards, you will try to produce a new action. Okay. And what we will define, so I will not spend too much time on that. We will define because we'll look at only at what we call complete. So I will not look at partially observed processes, but what I will define there is the state of the space, and the state of the space typically is a function of all the history of the action. So if you look at this, you have two things. So you have a private, an environment state, okay, which is the state, but it's the state of the environment, and in some, so it really depends upon the type of reinforcement learning algorithm that you are looking at. So the state of the environment is not necessarily known. Of course, it's not known to the user. So which means that it can be. So what you observe is not necessarily the state of the environment, but you get observation from the environment. So you don't necessarily have an access directly to the state of the environment. Okay? And you pick action, so according to this environment. And as I said here, typically in most cases, the environment state is not usually visible to the agent. Okay? And even if the state is completely visible to the agent, it contains irrelevant information. So for example, if you look at, as I say, an Atari game, so imagine that the state of the environment is really the state of the game. So the image, which is displayed on the screen, with object on this image. By the state, if you describe the state by image, which describe it's a complete description of the state at a given time of the game. In fact, it contains a lot of irrelevant information. So, for example, the color of the brick in the example I've shown is not necessarily very important. Okay, so there are many information in the state, okay, which are not relevant for the game. So some, and this is somehow important in some applications. I will not go that far in the sense that sometimes the true state of the environment is something which is extremely complex and which is much too complex to handle. Whereas what you need to have is an agent representation on the environment. So you should have an agent state, which is typically your own understanding of the state of the environment, which can be something which is much simpler. And the agent state is typically the state representation that you will use to take action, and there is no need that the environment state and the agent state would be the same. So it's typically what people do typically is that you you build, in fact, an inner representation on the environment, which is something typically much simpler than the total environment, but which is sufficient to take actions. Okay, so I will do a lot of assumptions. Some of these assumptions are sensible, others are very restrictive. But what I will assume from now on, I will assume that information state is Markovian. So which means that it's a the state ST will follow a Markov chain, which means that when I look at the distribution, the conditional distribution of the state at time t+1 given all the sequence of the state, it's exactly this conditional distribution is simply equal to the conditional distribution of the state st+1 given the current state st. Okay, and this is equivalent to say that the future of the state is independent from the past given the state, which means in terms of statistics that the current state of the game or the current state of the environment is a sufficient statistic for the future. So I know I don't need to keep in mind all the state from the past. I need only to take in mind the current state, and the current state is enough to describe what will happen next. So what I will assume is that the environment state is Markov. And the next assumption that I will do is the assumption of full observability. So which means that at each time instant, okay, I will assume that I observe the state of the environment, and I will not make the distinction between the state of the environment and the state of the agent. The agent state. So I will take the same, and I will assume that at each time I have access exactly to the state of the environment. So typically, I will describe that in alpha, say a quarter of an hour. So it's really what is called a Markov decision process. Okay, so we'll explain what is a Markov decision process. Otherwise, if I have different environment and agent state. So if I don't have access to the full state of the environment, it's called a partially observed Markov decision process in the sense that it's a Markov decision process, but I only have partial information, observation from this Markov decision process. It's a bit like a hidden Markov model. So there is a kind of a state which evolves according to a Markov chain, okay, but I don't have access to this state. I have access to this state only through observations, and this observation does not allow to reconstruct the whole state. So it's something which is so I don't look at that. In what I will describe today, I will describe the case where the state of the environment. So the state of the environment is full. So there is no need to construct. So I have a full observation of the state. Okay. Okay. So otherwise it's more complicated in the sense, but you can always do something. Of course, it's interesting by itself. It's a very interesting problem to try to solve a partially observable Markov decision process, so where you don't have access to the full state. What you do typically in that case is that what you do is that you are trying to update what is called a belief state. Okay, so the belief state is a function of the past observations. Okay, that you construct, and this belief state is what you a kind of probability distribution over the state of the environment given all the previous observation. So you are constructed this type of a vector, which is a vector of which is you don't observe the state of the environment, but your inner representation of the state is a kind of probability distribution over all possible states. And this belief state is constructed by typically one very classical way to construct this state is to use a recurrent neural net. So it's in this type of dimension. So you use a recurrent neural net in order to construct that, or you can use other type of techniques to reconstruct, in fact, an adjoint representation of the state. Okay, so that's so I will describe mostly the most simple case where I have full observation and Markovian state. Okay. So that's a description. So I have a description. So what I know, I have an adjoint and environment. The observation, I have a full observation. So the observation O of t is an observation of the environment state. So it's STE, which is equal to the adjoint representation of the state. Okay, and the adjoint take an action. So what I need to make a reinforcement learning algorithm, what I need to define what is a policy. So what is a policy? A policy will typically with a distribution of action. So at each time step, t, I need to take an action. Okay. So what I will do, I will be in a state because I observe the state. I am the agent, and what I will do from the past sequence of rewards and state, I will update, typically, a distribution of action given the state. So a policy will be typically a probability distribution at a given time instant t. I will explain how we construct such policy. At a given time instant t, it's a probability distribution over sequence of action given a state. Okay, that's a policy. I will need also to have a value function. So what is a value function? Is a function which gives me what is the value of being in what state. And what I will define as a value function typically, so there are different ways to define it, but I will define what is the expected cumulative reward of being in one state. Okay? So to each state, I will evaluate such kind of quantities. And then the last thing I need sometimes, it's a model, which is sometimes I want to have a model, sometimes I don't need a model because I will simply interact with one environment. So I don't necessarily need to have a model. So I don't necessarily need to learn a model. Sometimes it's too complicated to learn a model. So I can learn optimal policy or reasonable or sensible policy to act without really knowing the model of the environment. It's simply the representation of the environment. Okay, so as I said, a policy is really models what is the behavior of the agent. Okay, so I have it's a map. Typically, I am in a Markovian case. So in a Markovian case, I will a policy will be simply a condition. It's a distribution over the state of action. Okay, given the state. So you have a certain number of actions. Then you might have A might be discrete or it might be a continuous random variable. So it will be it's a conditional distribution. It's a I write it as it is a discrete. What I will for simplicity I will look only at the discrete case. So where I have a finite number of action and I have a finite number of state. This is why I use this type of notation. So what is a policy? So basically it's typically a stochastic policy will be a distribution over the set of possible actions given the state. Okay, and what is a deterministic policy? Some policy where given a state S, I take an action. So that would be a deterministic policy. Deterministic policy. If I am in state S, I take that action. Okay. What we will show is that most of under very general condition, when I am in a fully observed case, most of the optimal policy are in fact deterministic. So you don't need to. So for example, for a Markov decision process, under very general assumptions, the optimal policy is deterministic. So given a state, you act deterministically. Okay. But sometimes it's easier when you do, for example, a policy gradient algorithm. For example, it's easier to work with stochastic policy, even if you know that they are not optimal. Okay. So now, what is the value function? So the value function, as I said, is a prediction of the future reward conditioned to the state. Okay. As I said, what you are at state S. Okay. You are at state S, and you follow a given policy, which I call pi. So which means that you have a policy, pi, which is given by this, okay, and you play this policy forever until the end of the episode or forever. And what you do that, you have a gamma there, okay, and the gamma, typically, I will explain what the role of the gamma. The gamma is a discount factor, so gamma will be typically strictly less than 1. I put a gamma there because it's much easier to understand with a gamma than without a gamma, because otherwise you will run into problems. So there are other ways to define this type of stuff. Huh? You might look at rewards without a discount factor, but it's easier to understand what happens with when you put a discount factor. So what you put a discount factor there, and this discount factor says that you care more at rewards which are close to your to the current time, okay, than rewards which are very far in the future. Okay, so this is exactly what you are looking at here. Okay, and for a given policy and a given state, you are able to obtain what is called a value function. So the value function for a given policy is the expected value starting from the state S of the cumulative rewards. Okay? And of course, a policy will be optimal. To obtain an optimal policy, a good policy, you will try to maximize this type of reward. So what you can do also is that instead of doing discount like that, you can have average rewards. So basically, what you do then to do average rewards, you take so you might have first a finite reward. So you might say, okay, you sum the sum of reward up to the end of an episode. So in some type of games which are called episodic, so a game which ends. So when you don't play Go forever, for example. Okay, you don't play Go forever, so which means you can play chess forever because you don't play Go forever. So which means that you have an end of an episode. Then when you restart. So then in that case, you don't need necessarily to have this gamma factor. Or you might have, if you have a game which is a game without a limit, you can replace, instead of using a discount factor, you might use an average reward. So it's an average reward. So you take 1 over t, you sum the reward on a time frame big T, and you take the limit when big T goes to infinity, provided that this limit exists. It's called, in that case, an average reward game. Okay? Okay, so what we need next is a model. Okay? And so what we did next, we need a model which is explaining what is the way the environment is evolving. Okay, so as I said, we are using a Markov decision process. So what is a Markov decision process? You make a very strong assumption. So the assumption is the following. The assumption says that the next value. So if you are at state S, and if you play the action A, okay, then the next step, st plus 1, will have a distribution, okay, which is given by this transition matrix, assuming that you have a finite number of states and a finite number of actions. So you have a sequence of matrices which are all associated with the action A. So given an action A and a state S, you have a distribution of the future state. So you are not sure. So there is not a one-to-one correspondence. When you do an action, you may end up you are in a state S, you play an action A, you will not go to a state S prime deterministically, but you will have a certain distribution of state given the current state of an action. Okay? So typically this matrix, you don't know necessarily this matrix. So this matrix is So sometimes you know this matrix. So I will first assume that this matrix is known. Okay, but in the next today I will assume that this matrix is known, and in the next next week I think I will explain, if I have time, what you do when you don't know this matrix. Okay, so you don't know the model. You don't know the model, but you observe sequence of games. So what you simply can simulate. So what you can always do, at least, perhaps you don't know PSS prime A, but every time you play, in fact, you assume that the model will play according to this model, but you don't know the transition matrix. Okay, but you assume that the model exactly behaves like that. Okay, but at the same time, you don't know the value of this. So today, I will assume that I know the value of this quantity, that I know this quantity. Okay. And then the next step, the next quantity I need is the expected value of the reward, okay, which is a conditional expectation of the next reward RT plus 1, given the state S and AT. So this typically, if we define, I will give a little bit more better definition later on, but I have here all the ingredients. So I've got something which describes the dynamic of the state given the action, and also I've got something which gives me the average reward I will receive when I start from S and I play action A. Okay. So that's bad. Negative reward.
No. How do you choose measure?
No, you don't choose. You don't choose.
Okay.
You don't choose. It's given by the game.
Okay.
So typically, for example, in an Atari game, so there is the game is exactly Markovian. Okay. But the thing is that the only question, so you don't choose it. So it's given by it's really the environment. So you know that the environment is like this. Okay. But sometimes the transition is given to you. Okay. So as I will explain. So today I will assume that the transition is given to you. Okay. And sometimes the only thing that you have access to this quantity only through experiment. So you can sample. So you get sample from this. So you play action. You are the state S. You play the action, and which means that the next step will be produced. So you might have sample from this quantity. But you don't have access to the P itself. Okay. So this is typically the example of maze example. So you start at this state and you try, and the objective is there. Okay. At every bit at every place. So what is the name? Cas in what is the name of in English? Sorry? Sorry? Cell, sorry. Cell. At every cell you can go up, north, east, south or west. Okay? And what you want to do is you want to so the optimal action will be to escape this maze. It's the fastest escape. So what you put to force to go there, you put a huge reward there. Okay, so you encourage the agent to learn that he has to go outside the maze, and in order to make it go outside fast, what you will do is you put a negative reward every time you are inside the maze. Okay. So you put a minus time, so at every time step, so you put a -1 reward, so it's a more negative reward, okay, and you have a huge reward, which is the goal. So imagine there that you have a deterministic policy. So it's a deterministic policy in the sense that at each time step, on each state, so the state here, it's simply the simple description is a tabular description. So the state is a position in the agent in the maze, okay, and in that case it's a deterministic policy in the sense when you are on a given cell, you do a specific action. So here what you do is you go when you are at this cell, you go up, you go right, and so on. Okay, I think it's the optimal it's the optimal action. It seems to be the optimal action. Okay. The other action would be the drunkard action, where you choose at random to go this one. You will end up by Skyping, but it will be very long. Okay. So here the policy simply the PyFS. And so for this given policy, you can compute. I will look at a more sophisticated example. What time is it, by the way?
No.
Okay. So for this given policy, what I can compute the value of this policy. So every time I start, for example, I start here. So what is the value of the policy? I have assuming that I have a gamma. I put no discount. So here gamma is equal to 1. I don't have a discount. And when I achieve the goal, typically it means I stop the game. And to stop the game, it means that I put in my Markov modelization, I just put a loop on the last state, which means that always when I finish and I put a 0 reward there, in order that I am in kind of symmetry point in a Markov chain with 0 reward. So if I start here and if I follow this policy which appears to be optimal, but what is the value of this state is minus 16. Okay. If I am there, so minus 16 because 16 I have 16 cells to go there. So which means that what is the number of steps needed to go there is minus 16. If I am there, typically it's minus 15, and I have two actions, and I can start to see what are the good actions. So if I look there, so I know that I might take two actions. I can go south or north. Okay. But if I go south, I have a reward which is minus 16. And if I go north, I have reward which is minus 14. So the best action is I go where here it's clear that I need to go to the next step where the value is lower, and so on. Okay? And you can, like this, looking at the value function, you can start to have a feeling of the way to obtain also optimal behavior. And if you follow this policy, but this is exactly your representation of the state, because in that case, along one trajectory, you will not really have observed all the state, and this is something. So it's completely. It seems to be completely obvious in that case, but in practice, in games like Atari games, for example, where the size of the state is gigantic, because the state in Atari games is basically the pixel of an image. Okay, it's typically what happened all the time. So which means that you never observed all the state. So you will end up the game in a time which is less than the time needed to visit all the state. So we just to say that it's in this type of games or reinforcement learning problems, it's a bad idea. It's a terrible idea to try to learn this transition matrix. Okay, so because otherwise it would be what would be something which is not super super clever. But what you will do is that you will say, okay, I will visit infinitely often. So I will go to state S. I play all the action large number of times. Okay, on each state S, I look, and then I'll try to learn this quantity. Okay, and once I learn this quantity, I will say, so if this quantity is known, it's not very difficult to do the optimal plumbing problem. I will explain that in the next hour. But this is typically not that I want to do. So I want to do something which is more clever than, because typically, even if the state is finite, typically the size of the state space is very large. So in many problems of interest, you have very large number of states. Okay, which means that you are typically willing to learn a policy without visiting even all the states. So, for example, if you look at the Go problem, so look at the Go. So what is the state of the Go? Well, the state of the Go is fully observed, because what is the state of the Go? It's the Go ban, and with stones, with the white and the yellow, the black and the noir, black stones. Okay, so if you look at the number of states, I don't remember the number. It should be 2 to the power. So
Probably 39 times 39.
yeah, so 39 times 39. So it's just so the size of the state is just amazing. So you even if they learn the policy without they play more Go party game than all the games which have been played since the origin of humanity on the machine in 4 hours, but typically you will never visit all the states. So what typically happens in this maze problem is what really happens in the sense that you will learn policy and sometimes optimal policy without having to visit all the states of the game. And this is why, in fact, you will interact with the environment and you will interact with the environment and you don't know this type of quantity. And we will see how we do that, but not today. Okay, so what are the type of reinforcement learning agents? So you have 3 types of reinforcement learning agents. So you have reinforcement learning agents which are value-based, and this is what we will look at today and next week. So value-based is typically what you will learn. What you will compute is for each given state, you will compute the expected reward, cumulative reward for a given policy and a given state, or the expected reward for a given policy and action, okay, which is called, and this is from this quantity you will obtain a better policy or even an optimal policy. So you work on the value function. So there is a very, very known algorithm called Q-learning, which is exactly a value function, value-based reinforcement learning algorithm. So you might work on policy-based algorithm. So policy-based means that you don't learn the value function, but you learn directly policy. Okay. And for example, in the Go case, it's a policy-based algorithm. So it's a case where you don't use value, but you learn directly the policy. And you might have something which is called actor critique. So actor critique is it's a bit like in MCMC advanced reduction technique. So you have 2 techniques which play together. You have like a policy, so you learn with policy and value function at the same time. So and you use the value function more or less to learn better policy. Then you might have a method which are completely model free. Okay. So which means that you will learn policy and value function without knowing the model. This is I will explain. So you simply learn policy and value function. So this is typically the type of algorithm which do that are called SARSA algorithm, Q-learning, TD learning are policy or value function, but without model. And you have also model-based technique where you try to learn the model and you you learn policy from the model. Okay, so there are two fundamental problems that I will that we cover not today, but I will mostly cover the planning problem in the next hour. So I will cover this next week. So reinforcement learning and planning. So reinforcement learning. So the environment is initially unknown, so you don't know the environment. You know the environment through only interaction with the agent, and at each iteration, the agent, or during some episode, the agent is trying to improve his policy. And you have on the other end, you have what problem which are called planning problem, that I will solve in the next hour. Some planning problems, so you know the model of the environment, so you know the transition matrix of the environment. So which means that the agent can compute quantities according to this model, okay? And you will, in a planning problem, what you typically want to know, you want to improve at each iteration the policy. We solve now. We solve in fact, the optimal planning problem. So I will be a little bit more specific in my notation now. So remember that we will start from. I will introduce more rigorously what is called a Markov decision process. So we have already seen the basic ingredients, but we will be a little bit more specific on the way it is constructed. And so we will see three objects, which increasing degree of difficulty. So Markov chain, which is very easy object, especially because we are especially looking at a discrete time, discrete state Markov chain. So it's nothing very fancy there. Then we will go to something which is called a Markov reward process. So you will have a Markov chain, and on the top of a Markov chain, we will add some rewards. And then we will see the final object, which is of interest when you are doing reinforcement learning, which is called a Markov decision process. And we will see that when you have a Markov decision process and a given strategy, in fact, then you are back to a Markov reward process. So there are many of the structure which is linked with the structure of a Markov reward process. So I first start with the most basic object, which is simply a Markov chain and a discrete state space, discrete time Markov chain. So when you which is described simply by transition probability. So to describe what is the behavior of a Markov chain, what you need simply is a matrix which describes the way what is the probability of going from one state to the others. In what I will say, in fact, you can. It's very easy to go from this to continuous state space. Okay, at least formally. If you go to continuous state space, instead of having a matrix, you will define something which is called a probability a Markov kernel. Okay, basically, which describe, in fact, when you are in a state, a given state, you have a certain distribution of probability over the state of the set of states. So here in this case, the distribution of probability is because you have a discrete, a finite number of possible states. The distribution of probability is simply a vector of probability, but in general, it could be a measure. It does not change formally. Does not change much things. And a Markov process or a Markov chain, okay, is simply specified, especially because you are by a finite set of states. As I said, I want to keep the thing simple, so I will look at a finite set of space, okay, and a transition probability matrix, which describes the way, which is a probability to go from state S to state S prime. So that's the famous student Markov chain. So it's a very an idealized Markov chain, so which is given in all books, if you wish. So where you have 3 classes, and you have an exam. If you have an exam, you go to sleep with probability 1. But of course, when you are in a class, because you are, it's not very interesting. So sometimes you might open your computer, you look at Facebook, and when you are on Facebook, you are hooked. So you will stay on Facebook for a while until you get the information, and with a very, very small probability, you start to be again active in a course. When you have finished course 1, then you go to course 2. And when you finish course 2, because you are very, very tired, you go to sleep, and then it's a final state, or you pass to class 3. But in class 3, then there is you can go to the pub or go to the exam. So you go to the pub. In the pub, something random happens. So you might go back to class 3, but sometimes you forget everything because you are drunk too much, so you go back to class 1 and class 2. Okay.
Why you can't stay at the park?
Yeah, you cannot stay. So here you can. We can imagine something where you cannot stay. Okay. So that's and that is described in fact the behavior of this. So we look at this because we will we take on this example. And you have what is called episodes. So here it's typically in this type of state you have the state of Markov chain, which is an example which is very. So there are many examples of that form. You have a symmetry state, so you will always end up you always end up in a state where you cannot that's the terminal state. So sleep is a terminal state. Otherwise, what you might go. So, for example, if you start from C1, you can go to phi2, you can go to class 3, you can go to pass, and then to sleep, and then that's the terminal state. Or you can do to class 1, then go to Facebook. You can stay on Facebook, then you can do class 1, and so on. So you have these are called the different episodes. So it's not an ergodic Markov chain. It's a Markov chain with a terminal state, which is an absorbing state. So it's not an ergodic Markov chain. It's a state with an absorbing state, where the chain when you are in the sleep, you stay there, and you have different episodes which are what you can prove, and it's not very difficult, is that you will always end up in the absorbing state with probability 1 in that case, but for a time which is a random time. Okay, and then you can evaluate for each of these quantity. You can this is a graphical representation of this matrix. So you put on the here this circle represents the different state. The square represents the terminal state, and the arrow with the numbers represent the probability of going from state 1, for class 1 to class 2. So the arrow represents the probability of transitioning from one state to the other. Okay, so that's very classical. So something which is a little bit less classical, it's called a Markov reward process. So in a Markov reward process, you still have the same quantity. You have a transition probability of Markov chain, but on the top of this, you add another process which is a reward process. And be a little bit careful with the indexation. What I have assumed is that you get a reward in the next step. So when you are at state at time t, okay, you get the reward at time t plus 1. Okay, it will be easier when we will use Markov reward process into the framework of Markov decision process. Otherwise, it's a bit strange that the reward is obtained at time t plus 1, but it's perfectly okay when you are looking, because we will use the Markov reward process for describing what are Markov decision process. Okay, and we will have to define what is a reward function, and the reward function plays a key role in what I will say later. So the reward function is the conditional expectation of the reward given the fact that you are in state St. Okay, so. And in the reward process, of course, you assume that the transition from state S and time St plus 1 are independent from the reward that you get. And I will use the discount factor. This discount factor is a number which I assume to be taken between 0 and 1. Okay? So if I represent what is a Markov reward process, a Markov reward process, it looks exactly like a Markov chain. I still have the states, and I still have the probability of transitioning from one state to the others. But what I put on the top of this, I write the reward function. So to every state, I associate a reward, which is the conditional expectation of the reward from being in the state on a given state. Okay? If I am in class 1, I have a negative reward. If I am in class 2, I've got a negative reward also. When I am in a pub, I have a positive reward. Great. when I get the exam, I have a positive reward, and when I end up sleeping, I have I sleep forever in this model, because at the end of the episode, it's too bad, huh? But and you get on this so you loop on the final state, and looping on the final state, you get 0 reward. When looping, you get 0 reward. So it's so basically a Markov reward process is a Markov chain, and on the top of this Markov chain, you add simply a reward function. Okay, as I said, the thing which is of interest is not the immediate reward in this type of game, but it's the cumulative reward. So what I will do, I take the successive reward from my Markov chain, and I just multiply this reward by a discount factor, which is called gamma. Okay, here. And the discount factor is a quantity between 0 and 1, and without any surprise. So if I take gamma equal to 0, I got the myopic evaluation. So I will obtain what is called the greedy policy, which means that what I want to do is I want to obtain to obtain the best immediate reward. And if I have a gamma which is close to 1, it means that what I expect is to obtain a reward, but I take into account the reward that I can obtain far in time. So if gamma is small, it's more myopic, and if gamma is close to 1, of course, it means that I am trying to look at what happened even far in the future. Okay, so I am very, in that case, I insist to have the most reward, even if the reward comes very late. Okay, so that gives me the return. So you might ask why we are using only discounted cumulative reward, because first it's mathematically convenient. So basically, even if we don't do much math today, all what I write remains correct with gamma strictly less than 1. Okay. Whereas if I start putting a reward equal to 1, okay, typically I need to be a little bit more careful, and especially because I can have then a cycle in my Markov chain, and on a long cycle I might obtain infinite reward, and since the reward can be positive or negative, that may cause problems. So there is no problem, provided that you have the rewards are bounded. There is no problem when there is no mathematical problem when you assume that you have only discounted rewards, in the sense that you use gamma strictly less than 1. And then there are other techniques where there are other good reasons for using this. So which means that in most cases, in fact, people use discounted reward with gamma. So you might choose gamma close to 1, but typically you never use gamma equal 1. Or you divide, in that case, by the length of the episode. As I said already, so what in a Markov reward process, what I will compute typically is a value function. So the value function is a function which is a function of the state, and this function of the state is given by the conditional expectation of the cumulative reward given the state. So so if I look at the student Markov reward process, I can compute reward. If I look at the reward, so if I go to C1, C2, C3, pass and sleep, then I got this reward typically, because in that case I just take the reward of being in state. So it's the expected reward of being in the state 1 and 2 and so on. Okay, so it's easy to understand. So that's the state value. That's the state value for function for student reward for my student Markov reward process. So if I take gamma equals 0, it's a myopic reward. So it's a myopic reward would be if I am in state class 1, I have the value is -2 because its expected reward is -2. If I am class 2, it's -2. If I am in the exam, so which is and I pass the exam, it's 10. And so the macroeconomic reward is given by that. Okay, and I see here that I have a positive reward of being in the pub. Okay, but now if I look at what is the reward for gamma equals 0.9 and for the original policy which is given by that, with gamma equals 0.9, I can then compute the reward. So for example, if I look at this reward, it's still 10. Okay, why? Because it's I go there with probability 1, and there it's I found 0.1. So if I want to compute this reward here, so if I want to compute the reward of being in class 3, okay, so I have an immediate reward which is equal to -2, okay, but then I need to take into account the reward I get when I go to the exam and the reward I get when I go to the pub, and I need to weight this reward with the probability of going to the pub or going to the exam. Okay, so I will. So and when you use this input factor, so this gives you, in fact, in that case, the value function for this Markov reward process given this probability of transitioning in the Markov chain. Okay. Okay, so that show in particular that being on Facebook, so if you look at the value, so being on Facebook is the very negative reward. Being in class 1, you have a negative reward. So being in the pub, you have a small positive reward, but you have much better reward. So going to the exam, for example, this state is much better than staying in the pub. Okay. And for gamma equal 1, you have exactly this. So how you can compute? So we'll spend quite a lot of time on this equation. So how you can compute this value function? So there is a very simple way to compute this value function that we will use, and we'll obtain like this something that I call Bellman equation, but which are not really the Bellman equation. That's should be called the Bellman average equation. The true Bellman equation are a bit more sophisticated than that. So what I have to compute is what? I have to compute the value of being in state S, so which is the conditional expectation of the discounted cumulated reward, conditioned to the fact that at time t I've got in state S. Okay, so I assume, of course, that in fact t doesn't play any role there because I assume that the transition probability are time homogeneous, so in fact this quantity does not depend on time t. Okay. So when I look at this, so I just replace the cumulative reward, the cumulative discounted reward. I just replace it by its expression, which is given by that. And this is why, in fact, it's nice to use geometric discounting in the sense that I can write the geometrically discounted cumulative reward g of t as the sum of two terms, which is the immediate reward I got at time t plus 1 plus gamma time the discounted cumulative reward that I got at time t plus 2. Okay, this is why, in fact, you might have asked why I use a geometric discount factor. I use a geometric discount factor because then it's very simple to you have this type of very nice decomposition. If I use, for example, 1 over t, for example, you will not have something like that. Okay, 1 over t squared, you will not have something like that. So it's very, in this case, using a geometric discount factor makes the computation much easier. So then you compute the conditional expectation. So you compute the conditional expectation of rt plus 1 given s of t, but this is exactly the reward function. Okay, and here what you will do is that you will compute the conditional expectation of gt plus 1, and you will use the Tower property of Markov chain. Okay, so which means that you will compute the condition you will compute the conditional expectation of gt plus 1 given st plus 1 and all the past. which is the conditional expectation of gt plus 1 given st plus 1, which is exactly this value function given st. Okay? So by the tower property of conditional expectation, the conditional expectation of a conditional expectation with respect to a larger filtration is exactly equal to the conditional expectation on the smaller filtration. So it's exactly what is written there. So you obtain this expression for this reward function. So which means that the value function is given by this identity, which means that you can compute the value function v of s, the value of being in set S. What you will do is the following. The value function of being in set S, you obtain it as follows. You first add the average reward of being in state S, which is called R of S, okay? And then you weight the value function at state S prime, and you just weight them with the probability of transitioning from state S to S prime. Okay? So which means that the value function satisfies this very simple identity, which is called the Bellman average equation. The Bellman average equation gives you the value function v. Okay, it's an equation where v appears in the both sides of the equation. So you obtain this equation, which gives you, so the value function of the state S is computed recursively, is given recursively as follows, because of this very simple equation. So it's you are at state S, okay, if you interpret that you will get a reward which is R of S, of being a state S. Then you will go to the different state S prime, starting from I with probability P. Okay, that's the probability of transitioning from state S to S prime. And when you are at state S prime, you get a reward which is V of S prime. So you obtain this the equation which defines it's the equation which defines the value function V. So you can exactly compute the reward here. So you are so here, to make the thing simple, I assume that gamma is equal to 1. So if I am in state class 3, okay, I get -2 reward. So it's -2. Then I have I have probability 0.6 to go to pass and to get a reward which is equal to 10. So it's -2 plus 6. Okay. And then with probability 0.4, I go to a pub where the reward is 0.8. So which means that the reward at this stage is obtained using this one-step propagation, is obtained as the immediate reward of being in state class 3, okay, plus the average of the reward of transitioning from class 3 to the pub or to the exam. Okay, so then give you an expression that you can write very concisely using matrix notation. So V will be this time the vector whose components are the value associated with each given state. So it's V1, V2, Vn. Then you get the vector of immediate rewards, so the reward that you gain at every state, plus gamma times PV, so where P is the transition matrix of the Markov chain that you apply to the value function vector V. And which means that you can always solve this equation. So it would be 1I minus gamma P V equal R. So it looks a little bit like a Poisson equation. If you know what a Poisson equation is, exactly a Poisson equation, by the way. And this is where you start to see the interest of having a gamma which is strictly less than 1, because P is a matrix which is stochastic, so which means that its eigenvalues are all between -1 and 1. Okay, so which means that if you have a gamma which is strictly less than 1, the matrix I minus gamma P is always invertible. If you take gamma equal 1, it is no longer the case. Okay? You can even compute its inverse. Of course, its inverse is simply because gamma is less than 1. Y minus gamma P is simply equal to the sum of k equals 0 to infinity of gamma to the power k, pk. Okay? So you can solve it like that. So in fact, it's so you mean that you have a direct in simple case you have a direct way to compute this value function v by solving this linear system of equation. So in practice, you never do that because first there are much better solutions, and in practice, in most interesting case, of course, in the student case, it's you have five states, so it's very easy to simply do that. But in practice, n is typically very large. Remember the Go case. So Go, we say it's 2 to the power 50 or something like that, 49 or so. So you have an algorithm which is 2 to the power 49 to the power 3. So it just you cannot do that. Okay, so it means that you cannot compute really what is even doing the planning, even if you know what is. If the transition would be known, in fact, doing even the planning, so computing the value function, will already be a difficult problem. So it gives a solution for small MRP. There are much better solutions. So one better solution that we'll explain next week. It's dynamic programming. So it's interesting to understand the dynamic programming because most of the algorithms that you use are based more or less on the idea of dynamic programming. I will explain a bit what it is at the end of this lecture. You can do Monte Carlo evaluation. So there is a way to replace it. Even if you don't know P, you can still solve the value function by Monte Carlo. I think this is one of the problems that Maxime is working on Monte Carlo evaluation on the value function. Or you can do something which is a bit tricky, which is called temporal difference learning. So you been across this name already, or so temporal difference learning is a very, very strange technique. So it's called a quasi-gradient. It's not really a gradient, so it's not really a stochastic gradient. It's something a bit strange, which is very popular in reinforcement learning, where you learn the value function with an algorithm which looks like, if you wish, a stochastic gradient. And the funny thing is that for these two things, you will. So here you compute the value function, but you know P. Okay, it's just for Alex. And so here you know P, but for the two last things you don't have to know P. So you in the Monte Carlo case you simply have a trajectory of state and rewards, and in temporal difference learning you will even learn this online. Okay. So okay, the last step of the last thing I need to present today is what is called a Markov decision process. As I said, is not the most complicated reinforcement learning setting I might use. It's a kind of it's not exactly the most so the most complicated would be a partially observed Markov decision process, but here I need so I don't have access to the state really, so I have access only to a representation of the state, but I will not discuss that during this week. So I look at the Markov decision process where I have now the same thing that a Markov reward process. So I have a state, I have a probability distribution on the state, I have a reward function, and I have a discount factor, and I add on the top of that, I add a set of actions to model the way the agent, the learning agent, is interacting with this environment. And as I said, the assumption that I do is that the fact that I play an action in fact, acts on the environment in the way that it modifies the way the Markov chain goes from state S to S prime. So now, the way what is your influence on the environment? The influence on the environment is the following. So when you play action, you are at state S, you play action A. The fact of playing action A change the probability distribution of ending up in state S prime. So the action, so for every state S and every action A, okay, you get a different vector of probability. You get a different probability of ending up in state S prime. Okay, so that's the way you deal with the environment. It's typically what happens in the Go ban. In fact, when you play an action, playing an action is typically putting a stone on the Go ban. You modify the state of the game in a completely deterministic way. Sometimes the action is random; it's not deterministic. Okay. And you have also a reward function, and the reward function typically will depend both on the state and the action. And so you have a reward function, and the quantity which is of interest, at least when I look at the expected reward, the expected cumulative reward, is the conditional expectation of the reward given the state and the action. And you have a discount factor, which is gamma. So now you might look at this, and so now I will explain. So what it's exactly my famous student MDP. So class 1, class 2, class 3, Sleep, Facebook, and Pub. And you see that there is no. So I will explain exactly what happens there. So what I do is that I have actions. Okay, so I have actions. So when I am in class 1, I have two possible actions. Okay, I can either study or go to Facebook. So if I study, then with probability 1, I end up in class 2. Okay, and I get reward -2. Okay, when I go to Facebook, it's not random also, so it means that the probability distribution of the state given the action when I am state class 1, and if I do the action Facebook, I go deterministically to this state. Okay, so I can stay on Facebook with, and each time, in fact, the reward function, but the reward depends this time of the action. So this is why this time I don't write the reward is not linked. The reward is not linked with the state. The reward is linked with a pair of state and action. So this is why I put the reward now. I don't put the reward within the state because I put the reward on the arrow, because the reward on this arrow means that if I study, I get a reward -2 because it's a state and action reward. And the pub is not really a state because this means the following thing. So when I am in class in class 3, so either I start study and I pass the exam, okay, and I get a reward on this arrow. I get a reward which is +10, or I am a bad boy, so I go to the pub. And when I go to the pub, immediately I go with some probability 0.4, I go back to class 3, probability 0.4, I go back to class 2, probability 0.2, I go to class 1. So it means what? It means that if I am in this state, class 3, and if I take the action pub, okay, what is the reward? Is a deterministic reward in that case. So what is the reward of going to the pub is +1. So the expected reward is +1, and what is the probability of transitioning given the state S and the action pub? I have a probability of transitioning to state class 3, state class 2, state class 1. Okay, which means that in this graph, in this special case, the only state which is random is it's not a state, but the only state which is here. I have when I'm in class 3, because I have this pub option, the probability of ending up in when I do the action pub, I have a probability distribution of ending up in the next step, in the next state. Okay, so this gives me the describe in fact my Markov decision process in this very simple case. Most, but not all, of the actions lead me deterministically from one state to the other, and in that case, there is the only action which is with this black dot, which does not give me deterministically to a state, is the action pub when I am in this class, and this is why I have this dot here, because in that case I might end up in all these three states. Okay, so that gives me a complete description of the Markov decision process. Okay? So now what is a policy? A policy, as I said, a policy is a probability distribution of action given state. So the policy fully determines, fully defines the behavior of the agent. When I have a Markov decision policy, are Markovian in the sense that the Markov decision policy, and you might show that it's not very difficult, but you might show that the Markov decision policy depend on the current state only. So there is no, because everything is Markovian, if you wish, there is no need to record the whole history of the process to define the policy. So we will look only at policy which depends only on the current state. Okay? And we will look also at policy which are stationary, because I use an infinite horizon discounted reward function. Of course, if I in other settings, for example, if I have a fixed horizon setting, the optimal action will not be the same. So if I know, for example, if I want to optimize, if I know that I can play 10 times, okay, the actions that I will do towards the end of the play, towards the end of the episode, are not the same. Okay, so it's different. But here, since I have assumed that I have a game which does not end up, and I use this discounted, formulation. So I typically look at stationary policy. So which means that I don't take into account, for example, how far I am from the end of the episode. Okay, but in some cases, it might be of interest to look at policy which are non-stationary. For example, if you have a game which has a finite horizon, so you know beforehand that you will play a certain number of times. In which case, the policy typically will also depends upon time. So you can always look at an MDP as a Markov reward process. In fact, basically, an MDP is a Markov reward process. When you give a policy, so if you have a policy, pi, you will forget the action, and typically what you will do is that you will take the transition kernel PSS prime depending upon action A, and you will define PSS prime depending upon the policy pi by simply adding up this quantity according to the weight of the action given the policy. Okay, and the same thing for the expected reward. So the expected instantaneous reward is given by this quantity, and you might show that in such case you obtain exactly a Markov reward process. So an MDP, given a policy, an MDP is a reward process with this reward function, this transition probability function, and this average reward process. So what I will compute, and this will be the end of my talk today. So I have to compute two quantities. I will compute the first quantity, which is a state value function, so which is the value of being in state S and playing a policy pi. Okay, what is the conditional expectation of the discounted cumulated reward given the fact that I am on state S from a policy pi. And I will also have to consider the action value function, which is this time the expected return starting from state S and playing the action A. Of course, there is an interplay between the two, so that we will show later on. So there is an interplay between these two quantities. So you have two quantities to evaluate, given that you know P and A, and you know the transition. You know all the quantity in the Markov decision process. You might want to compute the state value function, or you might want to compute the action value function, which is Q pi. Okay, so that gives you basically the two quantities I want to evaluate there. So look at, for example, I want to evaluate the state value function for student MDP, and what I assume here, I assume that I have a reward which is equal to gamma equal 1, okay? And the policy that I will look at is a policy where I simply take each action at random with probability 1/2. Bam. So if provided that I have two actions to play, so at every state I have two actions to play. So imagine that I am there, okay? So if I am there, what I do? So I do, I am at this stage, so I will pick each action with probability 1/2, okay? If I pick this action, I will have a reward 10, and then I end up there, and then which is the end of my game. So it will be 1/2 divided by 10, which is 5. And if I go there, okay, I might end up, so I've got a reward which is equal to 1, okay, and I end up in each of these states which are given, whose rewards are given by this. Okay, exactly as I shown above, so I can compute the reward value function by using the Bellman average equation applied to the Markov reward process, and which means that this equation is given by this quantity, where V pi is the value function associated to this to the policy pi. So it's because it's a Markov reward process. Basically, when you evaluate for a given strategy pi, for a given policy pi, you got a Markov reward process, which means that you can evaluate the value function for a policy pi exactly according to this rule. And the action value function in this case is given by this. The action value function is given by this quantity. Okay, so I've got two things which are called the Bellman expectation equation, which give me basically a way to evaluate a policy, at least when I know when everything is known. Okay, so it's basically I will not spend too much time there because we have already explained that later on. So it's very easy, and we can play exactly. So we can see exactly what happens there. So by you can take, you can sum up over all these arrows. You can sum up everything that have happened there. And in matrix forms, you end up with this equation. So now I move because to what the computation of the optimal value function. So it's a bit more subtle then. So of course, but what is called an optimal policy is to find a policy which maximizes the value function. Okay, the optimal state value function is a maximum value over all the policies. So what you are willing to obtain? We are given a state S. Okay, you are willing to obtain V star of S, which is the value that you will get by taking the optimal policy. Okay, and you have that for the state value. You might have also you might be willing to have also the optimal action value. The optimal action value is over all the policy. What is the optimal value that I can obtain for my action value function? Okay. So basically, the optimal function specifies the best possible performance of the MDP. So if I run the MDP according to an optimal strategy, so what is the maximum value that I can obtain? Starting from S, what is maximum value that I can obtain? Of course, you will solve the MDP when you know the optimal value function. So what is the optimal value function when you for a student MDP, we will compute that later on. But the optimal value function for the MDP, we will see exactly how to compute that, but is given by this quantity. So where you are there. So and if you act optimally, so typically what you will do is that you are at class 1. So then you might either go to this or this. But you will go. But typically you will typically go to the place where the value is larger. We'll see there forwards, and then you will go to the place where the value is also increased, and then you will go there. Okay, so so it gives you basically. So when you are there, it's deterministic. You go to zeros at the end of the game. But typically, it's clear here that if you go the optimal value function, it also gives you. I will explain why. It's always true. In fact, it also gives you the optimal policy, and the optimal policy is basically each time you will choose the action which leads you to a state with a better value function. So you have this, also you have here the Q star, which is the action value function. It's equal to 6 and 5. I will explain how to compute these quantities later on. Here it's 8 and 0. So you don't go. If you are in class 2, don't go to sleep. You go to pass. Then when you are there, there is a strong competition between the pub and going to the exam. So you go to the exam, you get the exam, you go to sleep, and then you go to the pub, and then you are back. But if you simply follow if you simply greedily follow Q star, you will obtain the optimal policy. So what is an optimal policy? So as I said, what I call Q star and V star are the given that I am on a state S, or if I play state and action S and A, Q star is the optimum value that I can get from the state or from this pair of state and action. Okay? For something which is very strange, which is perhaps surprising, is that there is optimal policy. So when I compare two policies, what I need to compare policies over value functions. So typically, it defines only a partial order, okay? Because there is no reason why, if you take two different policies, there is no reason why the value of one policy will give you a better value function for all states. But so which means that typically, when you look simply at value function defines a partial order over strategy. Okay, something which is, I will not prove that today, but it's not very difficult to prove, by the way, is the fact that you have an optimal policy. So you have an optimal policy, which means that you have a policy. So despite the fact that it defines only a partial order, it's a reticulate state. So it means that you have an optimal policy. So you have a policy, P star, which is better than all the others. Okay? Okay, so perhaps you cannot compare two policies among each other, but you have a policy which is better than all the other policy. And this policy, which is optimal, is also the policy which gives you at each state the function V star. Okay, which is compatible with this, because it should be optimal, so it should be optimal at each state, so it should be the maximum for each state. And of course, all optimal policy achieve the optimal value function. So if you look what is for the policy P star, Q P star of SA of the action value function, or the action state value function is also equal to Q star of AC. Okay, so and it's true only if gamma is strictly less than 1. So I should have put that before. And it gives you a lot of things, which is there are several things which are of interest. I will explain. How to find an optimal policy? But to find an optimal policy, you find it simply by maximizing Q star of SA. So it gives you something which is very nice. It gives you the fact that there is always a deterministic optimal policy for any MDP. So if you take a Markov decision process, the optimal policy is always deterministic. And this optimal policy is always obtained as follows. You compute Q star of SA. Okay, I will explain how to compute this quantity. And you simply take the action which maximizes the quantity with respect to A. So you take the action which is such that Q star of SA is equal to 1. So that gives you the distribution of P star of S given S, which is deterministic because with probability 1 you go to the action which maximizes Q star of SA. So which means that there is always at least one deterministic policy optimal policy for any MDP. Of course, you might optimal policy are not necessarily unique, so which means that you might have you might be optimal and stochastic, but you always have in an MDP a deterministic policy which is optimal, and this deterministic policy is obtained simply by following. At each state, you find the action which maximizes Q star of SA. So which means what? It means that in order to solve the planification problem, in order to solve the planification problem, which means in order to solve for the optimal policy, okay, you simply have to compute Q star of SA. So if you know Q star of SA, you obtain, knowing Q star of SA gives you directly the optimal value function, and also it gives you also the optimal policy, which is given by, which is obtained simply greedily. You follow Q star. Okay. So which means that if you are in a student MDP, if you start, for example, in state Facebook, in order to behave optimally, you simply have to follow. You simply have to follow at each state the best Q star. So you go to Facebook, you go to class 1. When you are in class 1, you have two options. So either you go back to Facebook or you go to study, but study is better, it's 6. When you are in class 2, you might go either to state 0 or to class 3. You go to class 3. Then you go to 0 or you go to the pub, but you don't go to the pub because it's better. So it gives you, this path, the red path gives you, in that case, the deterministic policy, because at every state, in that case, there is no ambiguity. So the best strategy, in this case, is a strategy which follows Q star. So to finish what I want to say today, it's how to compute the optimal value function. So, and we will solve something which looks exactly like the Bellman expectation equation, which are called the Bellman optimality equation. So it's not, there are two Bellman equations. There is a Bellman expectation equation, and there is a Bellman optimality equation. So we will define this equation basically using the same type of one-step analysis. So you imagine that you know V star, and we will exactly the way we have obtained the Bellman expectation equation. We will look how what are the set of equations which are satisfied by the optimal state equation. So assuming that I know the function V star, S, and the function Q star, okay, I will try to see what equations are satisfied by these two quantities. So when I am in V star, okay, I can play several actions. So the actions are these black dots, and the state are so these white circles. So I am in state S. In state S, I have a state value function for the optimal state value function, the optimal value function, the optimal state value function, which is V star. Okay, and I have several possible actions, and each possible action, I have a state action value function, which is Q star. Okay, so what is V star? So what is the optimal value function? But the optimal value function is the maximum of Q star of SA. Okay, because otherwise I take that the optimal. This is exactly what I have proven there. So there is this gives me going deterministically to a point which satisfies this. Okay, is the best policy because all the others are linear combination. So if I use another policy, it's a linear combination of this Q star. So it will be so my optimal state value function is the maximum of this quantity. Okay, so this is the most important thing to understand. This is why, in fact, this is optimal. So now I look at the Bellman optimal equation for Q star. So I just reverse the argument. So I start with Q star of SA. So when I start with Q star of SA, but now I am at S and I have played A. Okay, so I just follow the dynamic of my game, and the dynamic of my game bring me to another state which is S prime. Okay? So what is the value of playing A when I am in state S? But the value of playing A when I am in state S is exactly given by that, is R of SA, so it's expected gain starting from S and playing action A, okay, plus gamma time, and this time it's a simple expectation, the optimal value that I can expect from being in set S prime. Okay, so if I am at set S and I play action A, okay, I will go with PSS prime A, I will go to state S prime, and in state S prime, the maximum reward I can collect is V star of S prime along the optimal strategy. There is no maximum there, so it's simply there is a randomness of the system. So the randomness system, if I am in state S and I play A, I will end up with certain probability to state S prime with these weights. And when I am in state S prime, I will collect, because I will follow the optimal strategy, I will collect the value V star of S prime, which is the value of being a state, the optimal value of being a state S prime. And so thus I obtain, for Q star, I obtain this quantity. So now if I plug, because I know that Q star, that the optimal value function V star is the maximum over A of Q star of SA, I simply replace, I couple these two states, I simply replace, I put a maximum there, and then I obtain a Bellman optimality equation for V star, which is exactly given by V star of S, which is equal to R of SA plus gamma times the sum of PSS prime A of V star of S prime. And this gives me, and now there is a maximum. So what is the difference with the Bellman expectation equation? So now I've got a max, there is something non-linear there, because I don't take, so for Bellman expectation equation, basically what I do, I simply average this quantity with respect to a probability distribution, P of, if I have a strategy pi, I simply average this quantity with respect to A, but in the Bellman, I simply take the maximum. Okay, so there is something non-linear there. So, and I can do exactly the same by reverting the argument. So if I revert the argument, so now I restart from this equation, and I know that V star of S prime is equal to the maximum over A of Q star of X prime. So I've got the same type of Bellman optimality equation for the state action function. So we have, so they are, contrary to the Bellman expectation equation, the Bellman optimality equation is a non-linear equation. So there is no, you cannot simply open MATLAB or Python and invert a matrix. It will be, it's a bit more complicated. So there is no closed form solution in general. So there is no, it's not a simple matrix inversion problems. So you have iterative solution. So you have, you can do, so it's called policy improvement. So there are many ways to do this. Policy iteration, policy improvement. You can do that even without knowing P. But simply, you can solve this problem. This is really the true reinforcement learning and not the optimal planning problem. You can even solve this problem without knowing P. So for example, the Q-learning algorithm will learn Q star, the optimal state action function, without knowing the transition P. Okay. And of course, there is, so you can go to infinite MDP, so which means that I work that with in discrete time and with discrete state space, but you obtain in continuous time you obtain Hamilton-Jacobi-Bellman equation, AGB, which are basically exactly the same. So what I will do next week, I will explain dynamic programming, and I will explain model-free reinforcement learning. So what are the algorithms that you use when you don't know, in fact, the transition matrix P? So you simply play with the environment, and you want to obtain optimal policy, but without knowing the model. So thanks for your attention, and I hope to see you next week.